So, Mr. Speaker, I'm only saying this bill is good because it proposes radical changes, Mr. Speaker, to help us to resolve the problems that will come, that we are in now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question is the process nice? Mr. Speaker, it may not be nice. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to take those decisions so that tomorrow is better than today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members of the committee because we sat and we listened to members of the public, Mr. Speaker, through a public participation process. Mr. Speaker, I'm a former chairman of this committee in the 11th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm there has never been an interest in finance bill more than what I saw in this one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we received almost 200 representations from members of the public, organizations, professional organizations, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House that we listen to them, Mr. Speaker. And the question is, does the bill have issues? Yes, there are small issues. But Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report to the House that more than 60% of the concerns of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, we have carried it in our report, Mr. Speaker. And so, members, when you are reading the bill as it is now, you read it together with the report which was tabled yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that all the matters that were of contention, we were able to give it a hearing, and a recommendation will be put to this House, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we alleviate the fears of the public sector, Mr. Speaker. Some of the issues include the excise duty on both manufactured goods in the country and imported goods, Mr. Speaker. And the stance of the committee, Mr. Speaker, throughout was that we must support local manufacture. We must give competitive advantage, Mr. Speaker, to our manufacturing sectors, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we were to industrialize, if we were to give jobs to our youths, we must see how to incentivize the manufacturing sector, Mr. Speaker. And that is why some of our proposals are actually deleting the proposals to tax excise on locally manufactured raw materials or goods, Mr. Speaker, so that our companies, we can encourage local manufacture, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the other proposals in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is the export levy, Mr. Speaker. Our exports are always less than our imports, Mr. Speaker, because we don't export much. And that's why that levy is there in the bill to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we build our exports. When I come from a tea growing region, which is the major export product in Kenya, Mr. Speaker. When we talk with them, Mr. Speaker, they tell you we only export to maybe 4 countries, 3 countries in Africa, 4 countries in European countries, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's a very dangerous situation. We need to build our export markets for our coffee, for our tea, Mr. Speaker, for our avocados, Mr. Speaker, and the services, Mr. Speaker. So this bill, although we seek to get the money, we are also saying we want not to tax the local manufacturers, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that as a committee, we listen to the members of the public, and I want to encourage the House. It will be a serious issue, Mr. Speaker, to pretend that we want the status quo to remain, yet at the same time we want changes. I know our friends from the other side, because I've heard them talk, Mr. Speaker. It will be wrong for us to say we remain status quo, yet you want changes, Mr. Speaker. We must do something to bring changes, Mr. Speaker. And we must be willing, Mr. Speaker, to take the necessary painful decisions now, so that, as I say earlier, tomorrow is better than today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so that I give time to other members, I want to say I support the bill, including the amendments. I second the bill, including the amendments that will be brought at the right stage, Mr. Speaker. And I want to encourage all the members to rise to the occasion, Mr. Speaker. We become bold. We reduce our public debt, Mr. Speaker. We increase our revenues, Mr. Speaker, so that we become a very self-reliant country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we continue the same, we can only increase the public debt. If we continue the same, Mr. Speaker, we'll continue building up pending bills, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we passed the estimates, and all the members were happy. Of course, our members on the other side were not there. But, Mr. Speaker, I heard the chair of budget say we have given 613 billion to education. I heard him also say we have given double the allocation to health, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that promise will remain a promise if we do not pass a finance bill that will help us to raise the necessary revenues that our country needs. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking in future, Mr. Speaker, that we will be able to raise enough revenues. We borrow zero, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking for a day, Mr. Speaker, we are able to lend to other countries, Mr. Speaker, because we have raised more than enough revenue, Mr. Speaker.
Order, honorable members, before I propose the question, allow me to recognize the following schools in the speakers and public gallery. St. Francis Secondary School, Mwea, Kirinyaga. Al-Amin Stare, Nairobi. Kinderville School, Mavoko, Machakos. St. Hannah's School, Westlands, Nairobi. On your behalf and on my own behalf, I welcome the students and their teachers in the House of Parliament. Order, honorable members. Members who are on their feet, take your seats. Honorable members, I now propose the question, which is that the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2023 be now read a second time. As usual, the screen is full. Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker.
Compose your thoughts and deliver your messages in 5 minutes.
One more because you've taken part of it. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to say that this is the most contentious finance bill since I was elected in this House in 2013. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this is so contentious that I look at it like a drum of poison. And Mr. Speaker, when I listen to the mover and the seconder, they've mentioned some amendments they're proposing, a few things that are in the bill that are okay. It's like saying that they have put a teaspoon of sugar in a drum of poison. Mr. Speaker, for me, I think this bill is something that we must reject in its totality. Mr. Speaker, the economic situation in this country is very dire. Kenyans are struggling. Kenyans are suffering. Mr. Speaker, very few Kenyans can actually put 3 or 4 square meals in a day on the table. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are asking themselves, do we put food on the table for our children, or do we pay fees, do we buy clothes? Everything is difficult. Life is difficult. Mr. Speaker, that is one of the reasons why you saw our team of Azimio going to the streets, because we are feeling that somebody needs to start caring for the hustlers. Mr. Speaker, 1,000 shillings a few months ago could buy, maybe even fill a paper bag. Mr. Speaker, today, with 1,000 shillings, you cannot even buy 2 kilos of sugar, 2 kilos of unga, 2 kilos of cooking flour. I mean, it's already finished, Mr. Speaker. So I'm telling you, it is a very bad situation. Now, this bill, when we heard that there was going to be some proposed amendments, we thought they would deal with those things that are affecting the cost of living. 16% VAT on petroleum products has been retained. Mr. Speaker, what does that mean? That the cost of everything transported, goods and services, will go up. The cost of electricity will go up. Mr. Speaker, there is also advance tax that has been proposed on personal public service vehicles and, of course, on transporters. Again, Mr. Speaker, the minute you increase taxation, what it does, Mr. Speaker, is that will be passed on to the end user. And, Mr. Speaker, the end user is that person that we call the hustler. Mr. Speaker, who will speak for the hustlers? Mr. Speaker, our turnover tax, which is a tax on doing business where there is no profit, has gone up from 1% to 3%. Mr. Speaker, how do you tax people for having the dream of opening up a business? And we are being told that those at the bottom of the bracket are going to be raised, they are going to be assisted. Mr. Speaker, this was a hoax. Now Kenyans can see for themselves that there was never any good intention from this Kenya Kwanza regime. Mr. Speaker, this House must stand up to be counted. And this House must listen to the voice of Kenyans. Over 93% of Kenyans have said we reject the finance bill. 93% of Kenyans, those that voted for us. Mr. Speaker, I am shocked that members of the House can stand up and say, despite the fact that our voters are unhappy with the bill, we shall continue and vote in its support. Mr. Speaker,
Yes,
there is no...
There's a point of order from the majority leader.
There shouldn't be point of
It
order.
is part of your debate.
Honorable Speaker, I rise on standing order number 91. And I hear Robert Mbui saying there should be no points of order. But I think that is a prerogative of the Speaker. Honorable Speaker, standing order 91 speaks to the responsibility for statement of fact. And I've listened keenly to what the Honorable Mbui is saying. And Honorable Speaker, you did invite us to debate the finance bill. And it's only imperative on us that when we debate the finance bill, we restrict ourselves to facts that are in the finance bill and not use this opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to deliberately mislead the country or play to the gallery. And I know the Honorable Mwalimu Robert Mbui has been a good teacher and a good legislator. But to state that the question of turnover tax is what he is misleading the country to believe, knowing all too well, because he's a good teacher and he reads. He knows turnover tax is optional. You either choose to pay a turnover tax or you do your returns. True, Honorable Speaker.
What is out of order, Majority Leader?
Honorable Speaker, what I found to be completely out of order.
Order. What is out of order?
Honorable Speaker, what I found to be complete out of order is the misleading statements that are not based on fact. That the Honorable Robert Mbui is advancing, and he should base his facts on what is in the bill.
Order. Order, honorable members. Robert Mbui, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And please, Mr. Speaker, these frivolous points of order are just meant to waste time so that people cannot hear what we have to say. Mr. Speaker, I talked about things that are in the finance bill. Even the 3% turnover tax is in the finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And I said this, when will this House stand up to be counted? We are being controlled like puppets by the executive, Mr. Speaker. The executive stands and says they are going to watch how we vote. I don't know what will happen to us. Mr. Speaker, members of this House must ensure that the independence and the power of this House is respected so that we don't be taken for a ride. Mr. Speaker, the division of Kenyans by this executive has gone on for a very long time. They started with the issue of hustlers versus dynasties. They talked about companies which I've had alluded to here, and shareholders and non-shareholders. Now we've also been told, oh, this bill, there's a fight between those who have salaries and those who do not have salaries. Mr. Speaker, we must make sure that we speak the truth. When you tell us that you want Kenyans to feel pain now, I don't know, they'll go to heaven soon or start enjoying themselves. It reminds me of Shakahola, Mr. Speaker. That is what the people of Shakahola told people. They told them, sell all your assets, come to us, starve and suffer in pain, then die and see heaven. Mr. Speaker, we do not want our hustlers to die. We will speak for them. They are suffering enough, Mr. Speaker. This bill, we cannot allow it to continue hurting them more than that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have had a mention that Kenya is not highly taxed because I think, I don't know, Tunisia, Morocco, they are taxed more. Their tax to GDP is higher. How do you compare Kenya with some of those countries? The average salary in Tunisia is 176,000 a month. Average salary in South Africa is 187,000 a month. Average salary in Morocco is 263,000 shillings a month. The average salary of a Kenyan is 22,000 shillings. How do you compare light and day? Mr. Speaker, let us talk the truth. Mr. Speaker, you know, when I listened to this team when they were speaking during the Kenya Kwanza team during the campaigns, They talked about raising the hustlers. In this finance bill, there is a proposal to tax welfare groups. Welfare groups are those chamas of our women when they put money together, Mr. Speaker, so that they can do table banking. 1,000 shillings each, they put it together, then it is taken by one. Now this team wants to tax that money, take money that these women have worked hard for, the hustler women of this country, the mamamboga, the boda. Can you people be fair to Kenyans? Members, let us stand up and oppose this bill, all of us. The voters are watching. The voters are watching. And I can tell you, those three people that you are respecting so much, when you lose the next election, they will not pick your calls. And by that time, even these positions of cabinet, I don't know, CASs, we will have fought them, we will have removed them. They will no longer be there. So members, please, let us vote.
Order. Order, honorable members. In any civilized parliament, when you approve of what your colleague is saying, you thumb your feet. You thumb your feet. The way the minority leader is demonstrating. For those honorable colleagues who are here for the first time, this is not a rally. This is a parliament. So thumb your feet in approval and keep your silence in your disapproval. Mohamed Ali Jijopevu.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Mimi nasimama kuunga mkono na vile vile nitaanza kwa kusema ya kwamba ni vyema sisi kama wabunge tuweze kujadili masuala ambayo yana umuhimu na taifa hili na wananchi wake. Ikiwa tutaanza kufanya mazungumzo ya kuleta uvumi na fitina, basi hatutakuwa tunasaidia mwananchi wa kawaida. Nikiangalia hii bill, Mheshimiwa Spika, na hili bunge lina wabunge wengi zaidi ya 300. Na asilimia kubwa ya wabunge ni wale ambao wako nje. Na hawa wabunge wakifika katika majukwaa wanaenda kuchochea wananchi pasi na kuwaambia ukweli. Kuna mbunge wetu kutoka upande wetu ambaye pia ameenda kuchochea wananchi, lakini leo katika bunge hili hayuko hapa kujadili haya masuala ya fedha ili kuwafanya Wakenya waweze kuelewa zaidi. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili taifa limekuwa taifa la ombaomba tangu Kenya kupata uhuru. Mwaka wa 1963 Kenya imekuwa ikiongozwa na masuala ya kukopa. Kila mwaka ni kukopa, kulipa wafanyikazi wa serikali, kukopa, kuleta maendeleo. Na ndio maana sasa imefika mahala ambapo tunataka kusema ya kwamba tutajinyima, tutajizuia na mikopo, tuanze kujifunza kutafuta hela miongoni mwa Wakenya na kujikomboa katika minyororo ya kukopa kila mwaka. Hili taifa hatuwezi kukopa mpaka kiyama. Hili taifa ni lazima tukaze minyororo, tufunge longi yetu vizuri na tuvae njuga na tuhakikishe ya kwamba tutafanya haya mambo kwa miaka 2 ama 1 hivi, lakini mambo yatakuwa sawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, unataka vipi Kenya hii tujenge barabara wananchi wanataka? Mheshimiwa Spika, unataka vipi sisi leo tuweze kuunganisha umeme? Unataka vipi leo tuweze kupunguza bei ya vyakula ilhali tutaendelea kukopa kwa wazungu ili kuleta matatizo kwa Afrika? Ni lazima tujifunze na kustahimili. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika bunge hili leo, hawa wabunge wenzangu leo wana nguvu kwa sababu wao, kila mbunge kama sijakosea ana nyumba. Mheshimiwa Spika, wacha nizungumzie hili swala la nyumba kwa sababu linachukuliwa vibaya sana. Leo mbunge wa Kenya kila tama kiingia anachukua milioni 30 na kununua nyumba. Hawa wabunge wote, mimi pia binafsi nachukua hiyo pesa na kuhakikisha ya kwamba Mheshimiwa Spika nilinde. Mheshimiwa Spika nilinde na haya maneno naosema. Hawa wabunge tuacheni ubinafsi. Tuacheni ubinafsi kwa mara ya kwanza, tufikirie hawa wananchi. Ni lazima tujinyime, ni lazima tujiadhibu ili tuweze kukomboa hawa wa Kenya. Leo unataka kupinga mswada, leo unataka kupinga bill kwa sababu ya kutafuta umaarufu. Siasa za populism, tunataka siasa za kukomboa taifa hili. Hatuwezi nyima maskini nyumba na wewe unajipatia nyumba kila mwaka.
I see nothing out of order. You'll get a chance to say something contrary to what he's saying. That is what debate is all about.
Mheshimiwa Spika, na naomba uniongezee dakika zingine 2 kwa sababu hawa watu wa Azimio wanapenda kupiga kelele mambo mazuri yakitajwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, nilikuwa nazungumzia, angalia katika hii bila, angalia Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwanza inapatia taifa hili uhuru wa kuwapatia nafasi wawekezaji waweze kuja katika taifa hili. Wawekezaji wengi wanaweza kuwekeza katika Nairobi, lakini wamepunguziwa kutoka 37.5 hadi 30% kwa masharti ya waende wawekeze maeneo mengine kama Bungoma, Mombasa, Garissa, sehemu ambazo hazina uwekezaji. Zikiwekezwa basi watoto wetu wanapata kazi, nchi inapata ushuru, nchi inapata nguvu ya kuweza kujikomboa. Angalieni mazuri ndani ya fedha hii. Kwa mfano, hii mambo ya 10% ambayo ina protect local market, ya kuhakikisha kwamba tunaenda katika juakali sekta, tunanunua Kenya, tunanunua Ukenya ndani yetu, na kuhakikisha tunainua viwanda vyetu. Angalieni yale mazuri yako ndani ya hii, msiangalie ubinafsi, msiangalie tamaa, msiangalie kuongozwa na viongozi ambao hawana dira ya uongozi. Kila mwaka ni kusumbua, kila mwaka ni kuambia.
Time is up. Women Rep Migori. Women Rep Migori, you are on the screen, or you are not ready. If you are not ready to speak, please take out your card from the screen to free for others. Go ahead, Women Rep Migori.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. The minutes that you give me, sir, I request that I speak for 1 minute and donate a few to my colleague.
You cannot donate any time.
Thank you, sir. All the same, I'll speak.
Yes.
My opinion is this, and I speak as a member of parliament for Migori County. The committee has reported that they went round and the people of Kenya suggested that they bring it to 1.5, the housing levy. They are not being sincere unless they were doing this out of Kenya, but not in Kenya. Kenyans are saying 0. They don't want it. They are not interested. They are not aware of your 1.5. And I'm questioning this. If you are dishonest, even after speaking to Wananchi, where is your honesty? Chair, you said that people told you that they want 1.5. Right now, I'm receiving calls and SMSs, and they're telling me, Fatuma, speak for us. In Migori County, Kenya at large, we are not aware of that 1.5. You never visited Migori. I believe you didn't visit anywhere other than your small offices. You sit there, take coffee, and make decisions for Kenya. We are telling you we are not interested in your levy. We want food on our tables. Our children are going hungry. We don't need houses. We are living in our grass thatch houses. We are comfortable with those houses. All we want is food. And as a youth, I'm telling you, shame who? Shame on you. I am not aware of your input. And I'm telling you, you should be ashamed. You are lying either for yourself or for your government. As the people of Kenya, as a youth, I am telling you, whatever you promised us in your agenda, keep your agenda and stop shaka-hollering us. We are not interested in your house. It will not even come even if you give you 100% levy. We know the truth that you don't keep your promises, and you're not going to twist us in this. Stop lying to Kenyans and face reality. Kenyans wamechoka. They are not interested in this house levy. They're asking for one request. Please give us food. Don't give us houses that do not exist. After all, as a Muslim, there is a golden house waiting for me in heaven. I don't need one from Kenya Kwanza. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wakili Mureu. Wakili Mureu. Rendikiri.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am not going to dwell on shouting and populism. I will go to the facts. Mr. Speaker, we are dignified members of this House, and we have a moral responsibility of guiding our thoughts and our future. Mr. Speaker, this committee is not made of tweets. It's made up of professionals who we believe have done a good job. They never sat anywhere taking coffee. They listened, and this member who has just spoken has experienced a lot of ignorance as a member of parliament. It's very unfortunate that we can continue saying our people can continue staying in that house. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of housing, I am the vice chair of housing, and I'm not ashamed of standing here to say I am so impressed by the outcome of this amendment. Mr. Speaker, this clause addresses the need for housing in slums, which are in Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Eldoret, and Nakuru. Mr. Speaker, we are members of parliament in these chambers who are leading constituencies where 50% of their residents stay in slums. What we are trying to do and what the Kenya government is doing is to uplift the standard of these people according to Article 43 of our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, these people who are talking and condemning the housing factor, they refer the need to go back to our Constitution. How are we going to realize giving clean environment and sanitation if we cannot raise money? We should not deceive ourselves. I think the politics of populism, I am shocked. Even the members of parliament for Kasarani, Mathare, Kebela, they are all seated here shouting and condemning the people who they are reading. And you are sitting, you are staying in a 5-bedroom house, 5-star house, and here you are, the government is giving a long-term solution to the problem, yet you are here trying to teach us on how to think. We are not going to think that way. We want to have a future for our people. Mr. Speaker, we want to create affordable housing for our children and generation to come. We have to have a fund that is going to do this. Mr. Speaker, this bill is not only creating houses, it's also creating employment for our children. That is the concept of housing. It is going to make utilization of our local resources, and it's going to enhance manufacturing, and it's going to create businessmen. So we are dealing with a very global and major issue, not the trivial aspect of just the shelter. Mr. Speaker, the finance bill has addressed the issue that every Kenyan is saying, Mama Mboga want road, Mama Mboga want education, Mama Mboga want electricity, Mama Mboga want health services. How is the government going to provide this if we are not going to raise money? The former government utilized our coffers when they were exiting, and the people in front leading the Azimio brigade, they are the same battalion that took off with the money that was left at the treasury. Shame for you to stand there and tell Kenyans that the living standard. Listen, you took a lot of debts. You left this country in debt. Now, where do you think the money is going to come from? Mr. Speaker, we are pretenders of the greatest honor. There is no way that we are going to lower the standard of living for Kenyans if we don't increase productivity. Productivity cannot come as if there is no money put in the investment in terms of agriculture and support services. So let's engage on issues. Let's not engage on populism. My friend, Mr. Bui, I was not born in parliament, but I want to be counted as one person who, I want to be counted as one person who...
Yes, Robert Mbui, what's the problem?
Honorable Speaker, we are debating the finance bill. And it is very shocking for the honorable member who was on the floor, the Honorable Indikiri, to start lecturing me and mentioning my name. Mr. Speaker, here it's about debate, it's about the finance bill. Whatever emotions you have, please do not, I think, protect me, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I will call him Walim.
Order Indikiri, to be fair, Robert Mbui, nothing personal. You have already contributed, and even Kathy has referred to you as my friend Robert Mbui to counter your argument. That's part of debate. Rindikiri.
Mr. Speaker. So we are saying this issue of address of cost of living is a shame to tell people that cost of living will just come from heaven. Nothing. We have to increase productivity. We have to raise money to put in agriculture. We have to raise money to put in manufacturing. We have to put money in value addition. That is why we are going to address the issue of cost of living. The others, my friends, are good people. You know inside yourself, you are not playing to the...
Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me state from the outset that I stand to oppose and to oppose vehemently this bill. Mr. Speaker, I have been here long enough now, and I can tell you, this is the first time we have come across a bill proposed by the regime in power, a bill that is totally insensitive to the plight of the people. Mr. Speaker, how deceitful can we be? How can you go around the country promising hapless Kenyans, poor Kenyans, heaven, and yet 6-7 months down the road, you come up with a bill that essentially seeks to choke them to death? Mr. Speaker, how can it be possible on earth, Mr. Speaker, that a government can forget about the people, the very people it's supposed to protect, and turn around to actually kill them, literally, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, it is also the first time that I've witnessed a situation where a bill is being introduced in this House, and somebody, a head of a political party which is in power, issuing threats, open threats to members of parliament, that unless you vote in this direction, you will see. That unless you vote for this bill, you will be in problem. That unless you toe the line, you will know who I am. Mr. Speaker, in which country are we living, Mr. Speaker? If this is not dictatorship, what then is dictatorship, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, going through this bill, Mr. Speaker, what is that?
There's a point of order from your colleague.
Honorable Speaker, is it in order for the minority leader to mislead the House that His Excellency the President has said that if you do not pass the bill, you'll know who I am? Can he be able to substantiate those claims, Honorable Speaker?
At no time did he mention...
It is actually Tinga that said that, Honorable Speaker.
Order, honorable members. Avoid unhelpful insinuations. The honorable minority leader at no time mentioned the president. He probably is meaning Ichungu or somebody else. Let him continue with his argument.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, I will ignore the Honorable Soro.
Mr. Speaker, going through this bill, you see an attempt to not only ridicule the hustlers or the poor Kenyans, but to actually kill them. Why do I say so? Mr. Speaker, we all know that this country lies solely on fuel and petroleum products. Every facet of the economy is driven by fuel and petroleum products. And therefore, the moment you set out to increase VAT on fuel and petroleum products from 8 to 16%, you essentially mean that life, the cost of living, is going to skyrocket automatically. Everything in life is going to become more costly, Mr. Speaker. And then you go ahead and remove tax on aircraft, choppers, and spare parts for those funny items. Equipment that are only bought or accessed by the who is who, by the very rich in this country. On the one hand, you overburden the poor person. On the other hand, you lessen the burden on the rich person. So what logic is this, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I would have expected, having heard the regime lament
that they found empty coffers. I would have expected, and any first-year economics student will tell you, that the logical step the regime should have taken was rationalize the budget, and cut off those areas that are not necessary. But what do you see? The budget has now increased by about 80-something billion shillings, over and above last year's budget. But the increment is driven by consumption. You see the money allocated to the office of the president, the money allocated to the office of the deputy president, the money allocated to the office of the prime cabinet, whatever. Monies that are going to service consumption, to host banquets, to buy flowers, to buy tea. Mr. Speaker, this is a perfect case of a regime which is living on a different universe, not on earth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can go on and on. Take the case of the housing levy. Up to now, including, and I let it very clear, my good friend, Honorable Kimani Kuria. Up to now, they have refused to define what this animal is. We do not know whether it is a levy, it's a tax, it is a fine, it's a penalty. Nobody knows, Mr. Speaker. And then they come here and want to tell us that they have reduced it from 3% to 1.5%. Mr. Speaker, they have even worsened the situation now. The situation has now worsened because the cap which was there initially of 2,500 has been removed. Now they have targeted even those who are earning bigger salaries more. Now they have attacked the low person, the middle person, and the higher person. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, in the village where I come from, we have got public servants. We have got employees who have toiled for years. Some of them are left with about 5 years to retire. They have got their own houses, which they have built through different schemes. You want to tell them to part with 1.5% of their pay, Mr. Speaker, to deposit in a scheme who nobody knows the intention about. Mr. Speaker, if you did just basic calculation, this 1.5% of an ordinary primary school teacher salary, he will need not less than 200 years to be able to acquire a house. And yet this person is retiring in 5 years' time. So tell me, who is he saving for? Who is he buying this house for? Is his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or who, Mr. Speaker? Nobody is coming up to give us answers to those very basic questions. And yet, to that poor Kenyan worker in the village, that 1.5%, which you are forcing him to fork out, can mean a difference between starving to death or surviving. The Speaker, that poor Kenyan worker in the village, or even here in Nairobi, depends on that 1.5% of his salary to put food on the table for his children, to buy a uniform for his school for his children, to pay school fees for his children, to actually pay all the bills that he incurs in his day-to-day life, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is one of those schemes. In fact, I would want to equate it to a pyramid scheme. Mr. Speaker, this housing levy, or whatever they call it, is a perfect case of a pyramid scheme. And Kenyans must say no. They have already said no, resounding, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can go on and on. You can go on and on. Look at the case of poor Kenyan women and girls, and including even boys, who depend on the business of saloons, kinyozi, and what have you. What have they done to them? They have imposed an excise duty on human hair, wigs, false beards, eyebrows, eyelashes, artificial nails. Mr. Speaker, these people have a bone to pick with poor Kenyans. They don't want our women to be beautiful. They don't want our men to be well kept, Mr. Speaker. They are basically strangulating every other poor Kenyan who is struggling. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, those saloons, those kinyozis employ hundreds of thousands of Kenyans. Hundreds of thousands of Kenyans are employed and depend on those kinyozis, those saloons. If you come out and impose such taxes, you are essentially telling them to go back to and engage in other nefarious activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you cannot be on one hand condemning alcoholism and drugs and so on and so forth, and on the other hand, you are removing people from gainful employment and throwing them to the wilderness. What a contradiction is that, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, as we sit here today, and as we debate in this very magnificent chamber, Kenyans are watching out there. In fact, I have received since 1 hour ago, not less than 200 messages from Kenyans who are watching us. It is therefore incumbent upon us to choose where we want to stand. Do we want to stand on the right side of history or on the wrong side of history as a house? Because Kenyans are watching. Do you want to side with the oppressors who have brought this bill, or do you want to stand with the poor Kenyans? The choice is ours. At the end of the day, it will be neither the issue of Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. It will be the issue of what position did a leader take at the hour of need. What stand did you take at the hour of need for Kenyans? They are watching, and it will not matter whether you vote yes or no, and whether yes wins or not. What will matter is where are you standing as a leader of the people of Kenya. The Speaker, in this country, we are used to giving empty and lofty promises, and then we forget about them soon after elections. This time around, the mood I am seeing out there, and I am very often at home, Mr. Speaker, the mood out there is that this bill is a make or break point. This bill can actually spark a serious revolution in this country. This bill, I want to caution you, this bill can actually be the spark that will lead a revolution that will never be ended. And it's going to be a revolution of the proletariat, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be a revolution led by the poor hustlers, Mr. Speaker, because they have had enough. They have had enough of lies. They have had enough of this chest stamping. They have had enough of this bravado. That hour of reckoning has now come. And therefore I want to say this. That even as we stand here to please our masters out there, our masters who are watching us, you must understand that the bigger, greater masters are the people who voted us, not those who imposed us on these positions. Mr. Speaker, this house cannot go down in history as a house which disregarded the plight of the people. This house must go down in history as a house which stood with the people at their hour of need. And with those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I oppose in totality. Thank you.
Dendi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for a chance to contribute in regards to the finance bill. And of course, I rise to support. And Mr. Speaker, I would want to take this opportunity to contextualize the debate you are having and the ramifications of this debate. Mr. Speaker, we just debated our estimates, which we concluded through the Committee of Supply yesterday. Mr. Speaker, we read a budget of 3.679 trillion Kenya shillings, and that is the correct figure. We are not adding our budget by the other figures I'm hearing flying around. Our budget is actually precisely 3.67 trillion Kenya shillings. Honorable Speaker, I want to contextualize because the work of the Finance Bill and the Finance Committee, of course, together with the Debt Committee, is to fill in the revenue side of the budget. And what we did yesterday and we have been doing is the expenditure side of the budget.
Honorable Speaker, any government have only 4 areas of raising revenue. That is the ordinary revenue, the A in A, the grants, and Honorable Speaker, if we have privatization. Honorable Speaker, the current budget as it is, our revenue side, 2.57 trillion Kenya shillings is ordinary revenue. 347 billion Kenya shillings is appropriations in aid. Honorable Speaker, 42 billion is the grant, and therefore that gives a deficit, a much lower deficit from what we had last year, now at 718, 720 billion thereabout. On the expenditure side, because I want to contextualize, Honorable Speaker, 2.3 billion Kenya shillings is the expenditure of the national government, which incorporates the parliament and the judiciary. Honorable Speaker, we also budgeted for 986 billion Kenya shillings in CFS in payment of our debts and especially the interest rate. Honorable Speaker, we also budgeted for Kenya shillings 385 billion that will be sending to our counties as equitable share. Why am I giving all this detail, Honorable Speaker? This House has a choice to make. Honorable Speaker, we passed the estimates of the coming financial year. And what is it that we want to achieve so that we contextualize and we put on the same platform on what kind of amount of money do we actually need? Honorable Speaker, whatever I have enumerated on the revenue side and the expenditure side balances. And therefore, any variation on the revenue side has to have a corresponding effect on the expenditure side. Honorable Speaker, out of the 3.679 trillion Kenya shillings, we are spending the same taxes we are collecting, the same revenue we are collecting through the finance side of the budget. Honorable Speaker, 630 billion Kenya shillings is going to the education of the Kenyan children. Honorable Speaker, through this budget, and of course being supplied by the resources from the finance bill, we have been able to add an extra 10 billion Kenya shillings to those of us who are in JSS, junior secondary schools, Honorable Speaker, to capitalize the students. Honorable Speaker, through the same revenue that we are collecting, we have been able to double our HELB allocation from this exiting year of 15 billion to 30 billion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, through the same revenue, we have been able to add Kenya shillings 10 billion to NGCDF, Honorable Speaker, where every constituency will be receiving 25 million to 45 million, depending on the formula, in the next financial year. Honorable Speaker, we have been able to add and actually double the amount of money we give to Public Service Commission in terms of hiring interns. Next year, Honorable Speaker, we are going to hire 8,000 interns instead of the 4,000 that we hired this financial year. Honorable Speaker, we have been able to allocate 249 billion Kenya shillings to our roads. We have been able to give our farmers fertilizer. The question that we must ask as this House, as we debate the finance bill, what is it that we have a problem with in terms of the expenditure? Honorable Speaker, we have to support the revenue side of the budget because, Honorable Speaker, that is where we draw the resources to be able to take our Kenya forward through infrastructure and any other kind of development that we are undertaking. Honorable Speaker, I support 100%.
Thank you, Ndindi Nyoro. The Honorable Masara. Give Honorable Masara the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this bill, Finance Bill of 2023. Mr. Speaker, first, I want to appreciate the Kenyan people. For the first time in the history, they have really participated and contributed towards this contribution. This is where we have seen and Kenyans have exhibited public participation. I want to encourage all Kenyans to be doing this in every bill so that they can participate in how they are being governed. Mr. Speaker, having said that, first, I want to say that I want to correct an impression which was given by my friend Honorable Mohammed Hali. The mortgage we are being given as MP, we pay for rate plus interest. It's not a free money for us. It is being deducted from our salaries. Therefore, somebody should not say that we are tuko na ubinafsi. It is a right we have been given as member of parliament, and we pay for it from our salaries. Mr. Speaker, I want also correct people who have said that we cannot continue borrowing. America is a very stable economy. Japan is a stable economy. But if you compare their GDP plus the debt portfolio, they borrow, but they utilize their borrowing well. To an extent, they give other countries their money which they have borrowed. Therefore, this country can continue borrowing, but what we must do is we must utilize the money we borrow to trigger development in the economy. That time, that borrowing will help the economy. Mr. Speaker, on this particular bill, I want to say this. On Article 28, Clause 28 of the bill, concerning fuel, Mr. Speaker, fuel is a factor of production. If you increase the prices of fuel, all other things will increase. It means those who are doing production will increase the prices of items. This bill, I agree also with my chairman of budget, that budget must be financed. But the timing is bad, Mr. Speaker. As we speak today, Kenyans cannot afford 3 meals per day. They are taking 2 meal breakfast and supper, and some are only taking 1 meal. Therefore, if you increase any tax, actually the government is not going to realize the objective because the purchasing power has gone down. So even if you say you are paying 16%, people will no longer use their vehicles. People will use matatu. It means the vehicles will be parked at home. Therefore, you'll be collecting less revenue. Mr. Speaker, if you read today's Nation, it is talking about the number of billionaires who have left the country because of high tax. If we pass this bill in entirety the way it is, so many investors and manufacturers and people can contribute to the development of this country are going to leave this country and produce elsewhere. Therefore, what I'm suggesting that the budget must be financed. But why must we employ a governor who has served 2 terms, who has pension, to be a CAS? That's a question I'm asking myself. Why should we employ an MP who has served 3 terms, who is earning pension, to be a CAS? Do we really need them? My proposal for this country is that let us put our priorities right and caution the current population for the time being until the economy stabilizes. I believe, and I'm a strong believer, that we must pay tax. But people who pay tax and they get development for the tax they pay usually celebrate when they pay tax. But if we can pay tax to pay 2-term governors money, that one will be injustice to the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, if you read in front of you, for the welfare of the society and the just government of the people, will we be really just if we overtax our people in a time when they really need us? I want to be in the right side of history that the timing is bad. Let us look for ways of financing the budget by reducing expenditure, sealing loopholes of corruption, and then putting our priorities right, and we are going to finance the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Chikati.
I am opposed.
Give Dr. Chikati the mic.
Here I am. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I just want to give the summary picture of the outlook of the finance bill. And so, first of all, Mr. Speaker, the way I understand it, overall it seeks to boost the ordinary revenue as a share of GDP to 25%. And I'll give the summary picture because of time. It also seeks to increase tax compliance rate from 70 to 90%. As you know, one of the challenges facing Kenyans is the issue of tax compliance, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to address the issue of counterfeits and expand the tax base. and the issue of counterfeits and tax evasion is a big challenge to the Kenyan community. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, it is to address the issue of debt repayment and help the government to gradually reduce overall government expenditure through elimination of non-priority expenditures, elimination of consumption subsidies, use of private-public partnership in rolling out e-procurement systems and other measures. Mr. Speaker, the bill overall seeks to mobilize resources to help finance deficit, which arises out of expenditure that exceeds our revenue. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, I will support the bill. Thank you.
Otiende Amolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill in entirety, and I submit that this bill is irredeemably and irretrievably bad and inimical to the well-being of Kenyans at large. Mr. Speaker, that is actually essentially conceded by the chair of the committee, because you realize, Mr. Speaker, that in moving the bill, he actually ended up moving the report rather than the bill. And he essentially dwelled so much on the things to be removed from the bill rather than the contents of the bill. That means, Mr. Speaker, that the right thing to do is to reject the bill so that we go back to the drawing board. Alternatively, they withdraw it and put all those things in the bill that they will bring. Because to say we intend to is a wish proposition. There is no assurance that it will be done. Mr. Speaker, 90% of Kenyans have rejected this bill. 90%. And the majority of all those who submitted their memos have also rejected this bill. Mr. Speaker, it's for a very simple reason. And the reason is this. Excessive
Mr. Speaker, I stand on, we have a responsibility to... wait, calm down. I stand on standing order number 95A, and I want to know whether Honorable Otiende Amolo, with all due respect, when he says and stands on national TV, here in Parliament, where we are broadcasting live, and says that 90% of Kenyans are opposed to this bill, what statistics has he laid on this table to say that he has done a research and found out that 90%, because, 90%, Mr. Speaker, is mathematics. These are numbers, and numbers do not lie. These, you must be responsible of the statement that you place on this table. So, Mr. Speaker, please, let him substantiate where he has gotten the figures of 90% from.
Proceed, Otiende Amolo. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that objection is symptomatic to the problem this side is having. They don't listen to the radio stations, they don't read the printed media, they don't watch TV stations. If they did, they would not ask that question.
Order,
let me continue, Mr. Speaker.
Otiende Amolo,
Mr. Speaker.
Otiende Amolo, you are normally more balanced than that. Kagombe cannot be the side. He's an individual.
Speaker, I'll proceed.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is that excessive and generalized overtaxation of Kenyans will only further burden Kenyans who are already suffering. The cost of living is so high, and therefore it's a lie to say that you want this budget to pass in order to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I wish to submit that there are only three answers to the problems we have right now. One, austerity measures. Two, reduction of corruption. And three, rationalization of government. Mr. Speaker, I do not understand how a government that says that already there's a problem insists on increasing the overall budget from 3.3 trillion, which it was in the previous year, to 3.67 trillion, if you admit there's no money. What is the principle? If you have no money, you cut your coat according to size.
So you don't say that you must increase it and therefore you must overtax. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, how does a government that says we are short of money explain why you must create offices that we do not need? You do not need the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. You do not need all the 24 cabinet offices. The Constitution allows you a minimum of 14. You do not need over 51 principal secretaries. You do not need over 50 CSS. And all these are taking public money. If you say, and it is unfortunate that a member of parliament should seek to mislead the public by saying that members of parliament already get money for houses, that is not true, because it is a loan that we pay at 3%. But if that is your position, then take away that free house, because we don't have it. Don't tax Kenyans on it. Mr. Speaker, corruption, corruption, corruption. In all these words, the word anti-corruption you will never hear from the words of those who speak for the government side. In fact, you only see the demonstration of those who are facing corruption charges being withdrawn. It is on record from the previous president that we lose 2 billion shillings every day to corruption. If we could even just reduce that to 1 billion, we would, fix the gap that they are talking about in government. Then there's rationalization, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are aware, and this House has debated, in the previous parliament, there was a report that suggested that we do not need the over 530 ministries and departments of government that we have, the parastotals. Most of them are duplicative. And it was suggested that we should reduce them to barely 50. Instead of reducing them, we have a situation where we are sustaining even those which were moribund, those which were not working. We are giving opportunity to others to earn a living. Mr. Speaker, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, my 2 minutes were taken. Can I get my 2 minutes back, please? My 2 minutes. Yes. Mr. Speaker, 2 closing remarks. You must listen to us, because even if you use the majority to pass this, there's still the courts. And even if you deal with the courts, there's still the people who are sovereign. 2 things. 1, you cannot have a situation where you are bringing the housing tax here. I want to invite you to note, first of all, that under Schedule 6, the role of housing is for the counties, it's not for the national government. And I invite you to look at Clause 8D. The national government is only to do the housing policy. So when you are bringing the question of housing and you're introducing the tax, you're actually amending the Constitution through the back door. And it also means then that this bill should go to the Senate, because the Senate must have a role in anything that affects the counties. And that is a point that you need to bear in mind. Lastly, it is a matter of the Constitution that you cannot introduce servitude. By telling someone that they must pay tax, which will not benefit them, and will go to the shareholders, as your leaders have told us, that is servitude. Servitude that we must reject, and we must reject this bill in totality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Mola. Members, before I give the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge the following institutions in the public and speakers gallery: Tender Care School, Embakasi East, Nairobi; Ontulilu Boys School, Buri, Meru; Moi Girls High School, Nairobi, Kibra; Sitam Schools, Makadara; Kongoi Secondary School, Kuresoi North, Nakuru. Mary Emase.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to contribute to this motion on the finance bill. Honorable Speaker, this is a very important bill, and members, I want to urge that we debate soberly and objectively, devoid of any emotions. And secondly, Honorable Speaker, as we discuss the finance bill, we cannot discuss the finance bill in isolation. We need to look at the entire equation holistically. Look at the budget and look at the finance bill. And I'm happy that members agree that we must raise money to finance the budget. And that is what the finance bill is all about. It proposes measures to raise money to finance the budget. So when I listen to members say that this bill does not in any way improve or should be rejected, and I look at you and I wonder, did you listen to the discussion on the budget and where we are proposing to distribute this money to? So for me, Honorable Speaker, I want to say that we must make a decision. It is a hard decision, but this is our country. We live here, and we have to make it a better country. And therefore, we must make a decision. And the elephant in the house is the chairman of the budget has just reminded us on the figures, what our budget is. And we know how we borrowed heavily in the past, and that is what brings us to the state in which we are today. 60% of our revenue goes towards paying the loans that we owe. And therefore, we can decide to choose. We talk of subsidies to continue. We talk of less taxes. Yes, you can choose to go that direction. But the question you should ask yourself, for how long shall you be able to sustain the subsidies? And I hear people saying, when we reduce taxes and we continue to give subsidy, we attract more investment, and then the country is able to grow. I want to ask you, reducing taxes is just one of the factors, but there are so many other factors of production. You will need to provide accessibility, that's the road. You may need to provide electricity and many other factors. So it is not automatic by reducing taxes that we shall be able to spur growth and improve things. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to say this finance bill, as I support it, that I support the position by Kenya Kwanza, that we need to raise more taxes ourselves as a country and borrow less, so that by doing that, we are able to actually allocate money to core sectors of the economy. In fact, the question we should be asking ourselves are questions on accountability, are questions on austerity measures, are questions on how do we fight corruption, so that together we are able to raise them. And that is why we saw in our budget that we are allocating money to go to the sectors like agriculture, so that we are able to increase production. And therefore, ultimately, the forces of demand and supply will help bring down the cost of goods and cost of living. We are putting money to sectors like digitization, industrialization, so that we're able to create employment opportunities for our children. So the finance bill in entirety is not a bad thing. And Mr. Speaker, I want to support this finance bill. And I've listened to members contributing. I was expecting members will say, I do not like this, this is not for Kenya, and this is what I'm proposing. I want to commend Honorable Masara. It's only Honorable Masara who has said, this is bad, I propose, probably we shouldn't have done A, B, and C. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee. It has not been easy. They have tried. And in particular, I see they have listened to Kenyans. They are proposing some reductions, like on the 3%. They're reducing it to 1.5. Probably the only thing I would want to request the chair as he replies to expound more on the difference between moving from mandatory contribution to a levy. And also, when you look at clause 76, they have, that was clause 76. So when you look at clause 36, they have also proposed to remove the 20% mandatory deposit for those companies or individuals that were seeking who had issues with the tax payments or taxes that are being demanded. That was demanded that they needed to pay deposit in court. So,
thank you, Honorable Mary Mase. Member for Kaloleni. Kaloleni, Katana. Kahindi, Katana.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia muda huu. Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia muda huu niweze kuchangia kwa mswada huu wa kifedha wa mwaka 2023. Mimi napinga mswada huu kwa yale yafuatayo. Bwana Spika, gharama ya maisha imepanda kiwango kikubwa zaidi, na gharama hizi hazijui ni nani yuko upinzani na ni nani yuko ndani ya serikali. Tabu hizi tunazipata sote kama Wakenya. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia ile nyongeza ambayo inataka kuwekwa kwa mafuta, ukiongeza ushuru kwa mafuta, kila kitu kinapanda, na anayeumia zaidi ni yule ambaye alikuwa akiongelewa: mama mboga, bodaboda, kwa sababu hakuna tofauti ya mama mboga na bodaboda na mbunge hata na rais. Kama ni bei ya mafuta, Bwana Spika, tunanunua lita moja kwa bei sawia. Bwana Spika, wakati serikali ilipoingia walisema gharama ya unga itashuka chini, wakasema gharama ya bidhaa muhimu zitashuka chini, lakini kufikia sasa, Bwana Spika, gharama zimepanda maradufu. Unajua kikwetu, Bwana Spika, utajua dalili za kwamba huyu bwana ana mbegu za kuzalisha, na kama hana utajua. Haina haja utangazie kila mtu. Yule babako ameketi pale nyumbani, Bwana Spika, akiona mkaza mwana ameanza kutema mate, anajua ni dalili kwamba kumefanyika kitu, anatarajia mjukuu. Lakini serikali hii ambayo ipo, hatuoni dalili za kutema mate, ni kutangaza kila siku bibi yangu ana mimba, na tukiangalia hatuoni ile mimba, ni kuhadaiwa. Kwa hivyo, Bwana Spika, ile tunasema ni kwamba serikali ilisema itahakikisha gharama za maisha zitashuka chini. Hapo sisi ndo tunasema, na mwananchi amesema hatuwezi kuongeza ushuru ili kufanya gharama ya maisha iende chini. Serikali inatakikana kuangalia yule mwananchi alikuwa anasema anamtetea, ili aweze kupata nafuu. Bwana Spika, sisi ambao tuko mashinani, hata wale wabunge ambao kwa serikali, imekuwa ni vigumu hata kwenda mashinani kuonana na watu, kwa sababu sisi wenyewe hela hatuna mifukoni. Tutawasaidia vipi wale watu wetu? Na hii dhana ya kusema kwamba ati wabunge wanapewa pesa za kununua nyumba, ule ni mkopo, tunakopeshwa na tunalipa na riba. Kwa hivyo mimi sahihi, Bwana Spika, unajua nimechukua mkopo wa nyumba na ninakatiwa katika mshahara wangu. Hii nyumba inalazimishwa kulala ni nyumba gani? Hii ingekuwa inakatiwa kwa hiari, yule ambaye anataka akatiwe, alipe nyumba. Yule ambaye yuko na nyumba afanye shughuli nyingine na zile pesa zake, aweze kufanya, aezekee ili aweze kuongeza biashara yake. Bwana Spika, ingekuwa vyema badala kupunguza ushuru wa nyumba, wangepunguza ushuru wa mafuta. Gharama ya maisha ingefanya nini? Ingeshuka chini. Lakini angalia ule bodaboda ambaye alikuwa akizungumziwa, na kama ni ahadi, serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha. Serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha, na kama ni kulaumu pia imelaumu vya kutosha. Kile tunachotaka sahihi ni kuhakikisha gharama ya maisha inarudi chini. Bwana Spika, tunapoenda mbele itakuwa ni vigumu hata ongezeko la watu kufanyika hapa nchini, kwa sababu wavulana hawana pesa ya kuoa, hawachip.
Silvano Zosoro.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to support the report by the Finance Committee in regard to this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, I want to restrict myself to the housing thing. Honorable Speaker, I once asked my grandfather where he was when his peers were being allocated huge tracts of land, across the Gusii region. And he told me that at that point, it didn't matter to him, to own huge tracts of land, because he couldn't imagine that at some point population will grow. He couldn't imagine that at some point land will be inadequate. That is the challenge we are also facing as far as the housing matter is concerned. It is for that reason, Honorable Speaker, that today, even as a member of parliament, my house sits in a 50 by 100 piece of land. And that is my area in Gusii area. Because of the carelessness and the don't care attitude my forefathers had as far as land allocation is concerned. Honorable Speaker, it is prerogative of every government to think and create structures that define the future of a country. I get surprised, Honorable Speaker, that we are seated here just talking about matters of today, talking about matters of now, not imagining what will befall this country as populations grow day in, day out in another 20, 30 years. When members of parliament rise on their seats, telling people that housing matter is not necessary, it is not a necessity, when we all know that it is important to have food, yes. It is important to have clothing, yes. But it's also important to have shelter. And that is what this government is talking about. And when you talk about importance of having food, this very finance bill has catered for that. And that is why we are talking about zero rating taxation on the farm inputs. In another few days or so, food production will be low in terms, the cost of food, cost of producing food will be low, food will be adequate, people will have a lot of energy, but they will not have shelter. And that is what we are saying today, Honorable Speaker, that it is important for us to pass this finance bill. As far as if there is nothing else that we need to be thinking about, then let's think about this housing thing. I imagine back in my area, and I keep saying this, that Gusii, Honorable Speaker, is turning to be a village slum. There is no land, but there are some pieces of land owned by government. And that is what we want to make use of. We are telling the members of the public that even as we think about today, in another 30 years or 20 or so, we'll need now to imagine the urbanization, because Kenya is largely urban in terms of, in nature. Everyone is moving urban. But now we are telling the people this way, that through this finance bill, you will be able to have structures built by government in your own sub-counties, so that in the inadequacy of land, it does not really affect you. Your people will have shelter. Because of the zero rating in terms of the farm inputs, your people will have food. Then people will live very okay. And that is the essence of the finance bill. But Honorable Speaker, listening to my colleagues from the minority side, and I listened keenly to Honorable Tienda Molo, when he raised issue in terms of, cutting down the costs, the budget appropriation. But I get surprised, Honorable Speaker. We stayed here yesterday until 10 p.m. None of the members, not a single member of the minority was in this house to challenge the committee of supply when we were doing allocation. Except Oluoch. Except Oluoch. It is in this house that we allocate and reallocate funds. If you wanted to cut down the budget, if you wanted to downsize the surplus of a certain particular...
Also be fair to Beatrice Elachi, she was here up to the end of time.
I stand guided, Honorable Speaker. Yes. I was, of course, with Beatrice Elachi and Honorable Oluoch. But all the rest were not here. You are talking about cutting down the budget as far as appropriation is concerned. That is a prerogative of this House. You are not here, Honorable Tienda Molo. So who else do you want to cut down that budget if you are not here? You are complaining that we are, collecting money left, right, and center. But we passed that budget here. We passed the surplus here. It is a shame. It is a complete shame, Honorable Speaker. And it is important for Kenyans to know that the budget is pushed through your taxes. And that is what the essence of this finance bill is all about. The budget...
Give him 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It is through this finance bill that we're able to display where collection of money, collection of revenue is going to come from. When we passed the budget yesterday, we are justifying our collection, our source of income through this finance bill. So even as you challenge the finance bill, ask yourself, what element of this committee of supply did you challenge yesterday in the committee of supply? None. You are telling us to borrow. How do we borrow? To what extent can this country borrow? Do you want us to go to the Ghana way? How do you say that you are defending the content creators? But we've displayed to you, we've been able to reduce their taxation from 15%, to less than 10%. I mean, really, why do you want to play populist politics when you know you also need salaries? You know very well that your classes need to be built. Your road needs to be done. You are here shouting about CDF. Where do you want money to?
The Honorable Dr. Jackson Kosgei. Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. On the onset, as I present my thoughts to this august House, I wish to say I support the motion. At independence, Mr. Speaker, our founding fathers had a conversation. Where do we take our newly independent countries moving forward? And the discussion they had was that we develop a philosophy not founded on the Western capitalism purely, or the Eastern socialism, but they looked at what they called an African democratic socialism. It had three thematics, Mr. Speaker, that we want to develop Africa with an equitable economic development. Second, they talked about an inclusive formation of our social structure. And they developed three strategic philosophies that informed our sessional paper, 1965. They talked about that in this, we need to build an economy, as they were addressing a financial bill like today, an economy that will promote a self-reliance, promote national unity, and also national development by pooling our resources. I am a son of a veteran war soldier in 1945. He told me when I caught polio that, son, now that you have lost your legs, you have a challenge. But let me tell you, you have no option but to improve upward. Never become a victim of paralysis by analysis. If we think Africa is poor and we continue to say we are poor, we will be paralyzed. We must look for a solution, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I wish to encourage us as leaders that we would like to be self-reliant as a country. And the best thing to do is to look at what we have to improve our nation. And therefore, I support this budget, which is bold, encouraging an African to be independent. Other details about how to elevate our situation has had some other mitigation given out in the country. So let us not send a message to the Kenyan people that we are done. We are not. We are able to rise up again after the Mr. Speaker. So I encourage this House, we support this bill without intimidating our own country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Kosgei. Peter Kaluma.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, the main reason why parliaments exist in the world is on the doctrine that there can be no taxation without representation. And so I want to beg to remind both sides of the House that once this finance bill is passed, it will not be anybody. It will be you who taxed the Kenyans. And that is why you are elected directly by those Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, I have a problem with what is in clause 2 in terms of definition of person, and I know the chair for the committee is listening. My interpretation of what is in clause 2, if you read it together with section 26, subsection 5 of the Tax Act referred, includes everybody. Everybody, possibly in terms of the definition under that section 26, section 5, it includes your ancestors. And I fear if we don't look at it again, you will have a situation where in definition of person, you will be obligated to take over the tax obligations of your relative, including the dead one. So I want to request the Finance Committee to look at this as we proceed to the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Speaker, I have an issue with what is at clause 36. And my view, Honorable Speaker, is that this would fundamentally deny people access to justice. Honorable members, particularly approaching elections, even in the last elections, Honorable Speaker, you remember when we were approaching, we were just hit with very big taxation claims, things we did not owe. The danger of clause 36, yes, Honorable Speaker.
Order, Peter. Rahim, what is out of order? Give the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think Honorable Kaluma is misleading this House, he has not read the report. The committee has already proposed clause 36 to be deleted, what Treasury had proposed. So it has already been deleted. He should read the report. Thank you.
Honorable Kaluma.
I've read the report and they propose deletion. Until it is deleted and the House resolves so, it is part of the bill. And I want to encourage the committee that if indeed there is a proposal to delete it, let it not suffer the fate of other proposals by committees which were dropped at the floor. Because the consequences otherwise, Honorable Speaker, would be grave. And I'm telling Honorable Dawood, a person will hit you with a taxation claim of over 2 billion or 20 billion approaching elections. And you know you will not get that tax clearance certificate if you have to deposit 20 or 200 million to then proceed to exercise your rights thereunder. So it will deny access to justice, which is a fundamental right. I would request that the committee, if indeed you have recommended, proceed and deal with it. Honorable Speaker, I have a concern with what is at clause 24. And clause 24 is talking about the increment in terms of income tax up to 35% for category of people. Honorable Speaker, I want the committee to consider those people in fixed term contracts, like state officers within this parliament. And I know you know who state officers within the institution of parliament are. Previously, Honorable Speaker, salary increment was a right to state officers within parliament, like all other employees under the Employment Act. But Honorable Speaker, when the terms were gazetted for some officers, particularly the members here, the annual salary increment was taken away. The consequence is that so many people under that arrangement went into their single-term contract without increment. And you know the fact of the matter is that we may be talking, but so many of us do not take any salary home. You've taken mortgages. When you are increasing to 35%, you are enter into arrangements you cannot renege on. Where are you going to get this money? And you know what a mortgage is. Where are you going to get the additional 5% to pay? When I know, just like me, I don't know the others, Honorable Speaker, but me, the newspapers have carried reports confirming I earn zero pay because of mortgage. And it is a contract you cannot rewrite after you go into it. Are we going to think of situations of those fixed term contracts without annual increment, or what measures are we talking about? Honorable Speaker, the issue of VAT on fuel has been spoken to. But the fact of the matter is that this will affect everybody. And Honorable Speaker, across the world, finance bills are negotiated. Honorable Speaker, in the last parliament, I remember the regime then, the Jubilee regime,
wanted to move VAT to 16. And out of negotiations weighing the situation of the economy, we settled out of negotiations at 8%. I would request that, because this is going to affect so many other, the economic issues down there, we at the very worst leave it where it is. Honorable Speaker, on the housing levy, Honorable Tiende brought the element of it being a county function. And I think we consider that seriously. But I wanted also to say something, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in addition to the fact that this is a county thing, it is not defined clearly how you will benefit out of your contributions into this levy. And I think in as much as some people may want to push it, let us define. If it were not a tax, Honorable Speaker, it would define how you benefit. We are levied for NHIF, NSSF, and others, but you can benefit. How are you benefiting directly on this? If you are not, Honorable Speaker, I fear we may be going into violation of Article 40 on people's property rights. Honorable Speaker, there is an issue in clause 51. And I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because the chair is listening to me and the committee is there. The area of tax and amnesty, Honorable Speaker, is something we should delete from our laws completely. Honorable Speaker, there is a time I visited a commissioner in charge of taxation. And just on his desk there, a person who was to pay the country over 10 billion, the minister just wrote, pay 200 million or 2 million. And we lose all that money. We need to stop amnesty. And you should question, as members of this committee presenting this thing, why are we allowing amnesty up to 31st December 2022? Who are these we want to give amnesty to before we can enforce the law rightly? And it has been happening. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Finish your point.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I would request that you look at that. If we are not having some fat cows to be, and I believe on taxation nobody should be saved. Remove the idea of amnesty, let us go for people. And then lastly, Honorable Speaker, each year we lose over 700 billion to corruption in this country. Look at the budget for EACC and the agencies fighting corruption, which we passed yesterday. We cannot be debating in retrospect, but I'm thinking if we were able to save that money we are losing to corruption, your budget would be, in terms of what we need, some 2.1 trillion, and we would be having a lot of money to deal with. Honorable Speaker, the problem is that we have encouraged corruption. And then people we should be taking money from are being given amnesty. I request, Honorable Speaker, that we look at all those issues among the other issues raised by the members. And so long as those issues have not been looked into, Honorable Speaker, I stand to oppose.
Wakili Mureu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity to contribute to the finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, sir, first and foremost, I'd like to support this bill for the following reasons. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is an economic growth resuscitation bill. And why is it that? Because the interventions proposed by this bill, Mr. Speaker, is addressing the core of our economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the finance bill is addressing on the debt level and how we can get out of that debt level. Currently, our debt level is at close to about 10 trillion. We spend over 60% of our collections to pay those debts. The second issue this bill is trying to address is unemployment. We have 6 million members of our youth who are qualified to be in employment, but sadly, they are there getting wasted. The other issue this bill is addressing is the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you are aware, the cost of unga is high, the cost of sugar is high, the cost of education is high, and yet, Mr. Speaker, sir, our people, even in all those circumstances, they want good roads, they want water, They want bursary for their children. They want to chase away darkness by having electricity. How else, Mr. Speaker, sir, are we supposed to address all those challenges by avoiding to pay taxes? Mr. Speaker, sir, my position is very simple. If you look at the provision on manufacturing, the finance bill has addressed clearly on the issue about our industries. And it's a sad story, Mr. Speaker, sir, because currently our manufacturing is only contributing 7.2% of our GDP. It is coming down from 9.2 a few years back. I know the manufacturers have an ambitious plan to raise that to about 30% by 2030, but that cannot be achieved if we do not protect our local manufacturers. And the way to support our local manufacturers is, number one, zero rate on the excise duty, especially on goods produced locally, but also put in a tax on the goods which are imported but which can be manufactured locally. For example, things like furniture which come in from China and other countries, put excise duty on them. Goods like sugar, goods like iron and steel which can be able to be manufactured locally. Because again, that's the only way we can be able to resuscitate our manufacturing. Number two, Mr. Speaker, sir, manufacturing supports 40% of our employment. Today, as I said earlier, the biggest challenge is that we have highly educated young people, but they do not have employment. And the only way we can be able to address that is to ensure that we address the element of manufacturing, because that's the only way we can be able to place them in employment. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about the issue of a digital economy. As you are aware, Kenya is one of the leading countries in terms of innovation economy. And being that the countries all around the Kenya, they look up to Kenya to just to copy what you are doing. Look at the way we have embraced the telephonic technology, the payment system, the lending system. The countries around in Africa, they are looking to Kenya as a shining star. But the question is, have Kenyans benefited from that bubbling economy? And that's why the proposal to put in a tax is for purposes of that industry to contribute to the nation, to contribute to the economy of this country, as we also along the way create employment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. And I support this bill.
Fatuma Jeho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to oppose this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that we are on an economic downturn. Our economic is collapsing. Mr. Speaker, today, if we were given this bill and none of us were a member of this honorable House, I can assure you none of us could have passed this bill. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because of few reasons. I'll start with the housing levy, Mr. Speaker. I've just looked at the report, and they are telling us they have proposed 1.5, Mr. Speaker. And looking at the report, they are telling us they are going to build 50,000 affordable housing. I would like to ask these honorable members and the chair of this committee, have you given us the timeline of this proposed affordable housing? What is the budget, Mr. Speaker? How many Kenyans are they going to be occupied in these 50,000 houses out of the 50 million Kenyans we have? I would like to take an example of a pay slip of a teacher or a police officer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish I came with a pay slip of a teacher. These people are serving so many loans, Mr. Speaker. We are adding for them a housing levy of 1.5. How are they going to pay, Mr. Speaker? Our police officers are dying out of depression because of the loans they are paying. We cannot add for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say collecting and taxing the citizens is not a bad thing. But it's not the right time for the people to be taxed. It has come the wrong time, Mr. Speaker. It's about our people, the people we represent, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to talk to His Excellency the President. The people who are seated on the other side, Mr. President, are not passing this bill because they want it. They are doing this for you, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker, I want you to protect me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, history will judge us for passing this bill, Mr. Speaker. Let me go to manufacture. There is no point of order here, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are debating the report on the Finance Committee.
No, we are debating the finance bill. Give him the mic.
Honorable Speaker, it is not in order for the Honorable Fatma to impute improper motives on her colleagues as far as this House is concerned in terms of the debate. He's saying we want to please the President. Honorable Speaker, this bill is not owned by the President. It is owned by this House, Honorable Speaker. And she has an opportunity to support or oppose. And the majority will have their say. Minority will have, their way. Minority will have their say. So it is wrong for her to impute improper motives on our colleagues and say we want to please the President. Really, it's wrong. It's an insult to the colleagues. It's an insult. And she doesn't even come to the House.
Order. Fatuma, each member is here in their own right. So restrict yourself to the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will continue by what I was saying, Mr. Speaker. I am here as the county MP for Wajir. I'll speak out my mind and I'll say what I think is right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm here courtesy of the people of Wajir and I represent Kenyans equally, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to touch on the manufacturing. There is no doubt that the manufacturers are leaving Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Today's paper, we have seen the billionaires are leaving Kenyans. It has come to our attention. Most of us, we need to do something, Mr. Speaker. If you look at M-Pesa, right now the government is spying on our M-Pesa transaction, Mr. Speaker. We cannot even deposit 100,000 on our M-Pesa account because it's taxed, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, we just need to put our foot down and just think, for heaven's sake, Mr. Speaker. It's not about which party you belong to.
What's your point of order? Give the mic to Honorable Kagombe. Yes, there you are.
Mr. Speaker, again, I rise on standing order number 91.1. And when you say, that is a very grievous accusation of the government, that the government is spying on Kenyans on M-Pesa. That is something that needs to be substantiated because this House has a responsibility to debate such a breach of privacy of Kenyans, and therefore the honorable member cannot just stand here and talk about it and move on. So we need to substantiate what you're saying. Number two, we are discussing the finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And this finance bill, Mr. Speaker, has got nothing to do with the issues that she's raising. That is an issue that she can come and she knows the way to raise such an address and such an issue to this House. A proper way of raising it through a motion or through a bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Fatuma, wind up. Your time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I talk on M-Pesa, I'm talking on technology, Mr. Speaker. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker. I'll go to food security, Mr. Speaker. We are doing VAT fuel on 16%. Mr. Speaker, I just want someone to explain to Kenyans, when you impose 16% on fuel, how do you expect to secure food on this country? Everything depends on food, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I sit down, before, because Mr. Speaker, sorry, I've been interrupted and I've forgotten a few things. Mr. Speaker, we need to earn the trust of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We remember what happened, the Gulwana Kulalu project, the millions and the trillions shillings that were spent on that. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we need to trust, we need to get the confidence of the Kenyan.
Honorable McClap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to state from the onset that I shall support this finance bill as a member of Finance Committee and as a member of Parliament for Baringo North. Mr. Speaker, there are puzzling events that has happened. Number one, yesterday we went close by close approving expenditure for the budget, knowing very well that this budget shall be financed through ordinary revenues and revenues that will be collected through this finance bill. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore very illogical to again, attack the same finance bill that tries to raise revenue to completely be able to finance the budget for this country. Mr. Speaker, we are all Kenyans. All of us here, regardless of which political divide you come from, in this particular budget that we passed close by close yesterday, has programs that are cuts across the Republic of Kenya. How then do we finance these programs if we don't finance using our own resources? Mr. Speaker, I am a believer of Kenya. I believe that this country shall be able to move to become one of the economies of Africa, strong economies of Africa. How did these countries that have succeeded be able to finance their programs? Mr. Speaker, we can never be able to develop this country using borrowed resources. Time has come that we must finance this country using our own resources by at least a little bit sacrificing for the nation. Mr. Speaker, we met some, in this finance committee, there were about 1,500 petitions. For the first time, Mr. Speaker, I sat for more than 20 days trying to listen to professionals of high caliber who argue from left, center, right on the issues that are raised in this finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And we as a committee, Mr. Speaker, had made some proposals, Mr. Speaker, and I wonder even my good friend Wandai did not read that we made a proposal that the issue of wigs, eyelashes, and everything were deleted. We made a proposal that this must be deleted to protect the hustlers of this country, because that clause, many Kenyans who came before us felt that this is a very bad clause. Mr. Speaker, we also on rental income, Mr. Speaker, being able to make a proposal to reduce from 10 to 7.5% so that the investors across the political divide who want to do projects on housing, Mr. Speaker, will be able to get value for their money. How else do we protect the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, when we reduced the housing levy from 3 to 1.5%, Mr. Speaker? We sat as a committee and be able to address the issues that were raised by Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, even including bringing in coffee. We made a proposal to zero rate export of coffee levy, Mr. Speaker. Coffee was not there, we brought in, there was only tea, zero rating on tea, but we brought in coffee because the Wanjigus of this country, Mr. Speaker, would want to benefit by actually getting maximum returns for coffee, tea, among other products that are actually grown in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this is our country. This finance bill attempts to raise 289 to around 300 billion. Mr. Speaker, how then do we raise these programs, Mr. Speaker, and all the people of Kenya, regardless of where they live,
Whether they live in Asimio zones, they require roads, they require medicine, they require fertilizer, they require programs to lift their lives. How else do we finance and grow the economy of this country? The people of Kenya must be able to sacrifice a little bit so that we can finance our programs, finance our budgets, using our own resources, not the resources borrowed from the white people, Mr. Speaker. Enough is enough. We must grow our economy using our own resources and using ourselves, Mr. Speaker. We must be able to contribute. Asimio people do not live outside Kenya. They live in Kenya together with all of us. And we must know that this is our country and we must work together, pull up resources, provide solutions rather than attacking everything in this finance, Mr. Speaker. Let us provide solutions for the welfare of the people of Kenya because this is our country and we can.
Adan Kainan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to work with President Moi, President Kibaki, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and right now President William Ruto, Mr. Speaker. And we must all accept that we have a beautiful country called Kenya, Mr. Speaker, which all of us as individuals, as groups, must accept and believe in. Mr. Speaker, the issue of budget making, I know, is emotive, it is difficult, it's painful. And I must say from the onset that as a member of the Finance Committee, we have had the honest task, Mr. Speaker, of going through the different presentations by different groups from different sectors of our economy, Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of both their collective or individual rights, Mr. Speaker, because Kenya is a democracy. Every individual has the right to a divergent view, Mr. Speaker, and that is why, in the minds of the framers of the current Constitution, Mr. Speaker, the right to public participation is enshrined in the Constitution. But, Mr. Speaker, having said this, I want each one of us as the leadership, and being the leadership and being in this August House, Mr. Speaker, is a privilege. Because out of the 50 million Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans in their own wisdom have decided to have a few of us here as their representatives, Mr. Speaker, and we want to reflect. And I want to ask each one of you a question without venturing into your political persuasion. Where were we in 1963? Where did our forefathers expect us to be? And where are we today? And what is expected of each one of us to do so that Kenya joins the League of Developed Nations, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this country has recently been voted as one of the best in human resource capital, meaning therefore outside there, in the eyes of the international community, there are many Kenyans who have gone to school. Our task as the elected representatives is to give them opportunities to get jobs, is to give them opportunities to remove them from that ladder of being underemployed and unemployed, Mr. Speaker. How is this achievable? This is achievable only through taxation, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. Today we expected, and I know we have my friends here, in our democracy we have two sides. Today we expected, what I expected, and this will have guided me, is to get an alternative tax proposals from those who are opposed to what the government is doing. It is not there. We expected to see an alternative budget proposal. We are not seeing it, Mr. Speaker. What is there, Mr. Speaker, is a government elected by the people of Kenya implementing their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, and therefore denying them the right to pursue their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, is an infringement of both their rights as individuals, as government, Mr. Speaker, and even to the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say this as a member of the Finance Committee, having gone through this, and having said taxation is a painful thing, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the finance bill as it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have been around as a person of immense institutional memory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, look at the missed opportunities. This country, because of the fear of the unknown, we have stagnated. We have lost our stature as an economic hub. It's simply because we sit somewhere there. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Ethiopia. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Tanzania. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Uganda. Where do you want to place Kenya, Mr. Speaker? It's because we have persuaded ourselves that it's not us to do the right thing. Somebody else must come. It's our time to say this country requires development, Mr. Speaker. It's our time to say, as members of the 13th Parliament, what the government is proposing, bring the alternative. And let me tell you this for free. What you have been asked to do is to deny the government taxes, misinform the Kenyan public, so that your regime becomes unpopular and collapses. Don't accept that truth. This government must function. This government has been elected democratically by the people of Kenya. And therefore, 1 month ago, Mr. Speaker, the salary is delayed. You saw the kind of picketing that was going on. I'm sure in your office, you have had Molongos, Yawatu, Kuliza, Mishara. Isn't it? Where will the government generate the money from? The government must generate the money from taxations, through this bill. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this. We have a country. This country must move on. This is the final takeoff for the Republic of Kenya. And please.
Lotte. Okay, give him a minute.
Is not cowardice. It's part of our democracy. Let's debate. This is a debating chamber. Let's not shout at each other. And I always say this as a practitioner. Let's debate. The majority will have their way, while the minority will have had their say. And that is the essence of democracy. Pass this bill as recommended by the finance bill. I support.
Titus Lotte from Kacheliba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to the finance bill. Mr. Speaker, as a member of this respected House, and also a member of the society that has a mental capacity to think, I want to contribute as follows to this bill, Mr. Speaker. Far from it, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of information that has gone to the public that this bill is supposed to be punitive to Kenyans. But having looked through it, Mr. Speaker, I realized that this bill is trying to address the inefficiency that has been there in our tax regime, Mr. Speaker. We've actually been collecting very little amount of revenue vis-a-vis the capacity that we have. And this bill is not as punitive as we are told. I've looked through this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I've realized that only 3 main taxes have been introduced, and the rest have actually been made efficient. The first one, Mr. Speaker, is the digital monetization of the digital content. And this is in regards to the principle of taxation, Mr. Speaker, where taxation is supposed to be as evolving as possible in regards to respond to the evolving nature of our society. When our tax regime was done, Mr. Speaker, there was very little in terms of digital content. And because Kenyans are embracing the digital content very quickly, our tax regime is also supposed to embrace. And so, introducing the 15% on the digital content, Mr. Speaker, is in regards to the evolvement of this. This is very nice, Mr. Speaker, because we've actually seen our revenue falling because a lot of advertisements, a lot of our contents are actually becoming digital. And so the mother of our taxation is also reducing because we cannot now net in the traditional taxes. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that we actually also go along with the digital migration. The other tax that I've seen as new is the club entrance fee, Mr. Speaker. Initially, this club entrance fee was free, and it's only for the privileged, Mr. Speaker. The club members that are sitting here are paying hundreds of thousands to millions to clubs, and yet they are supposed to be exempted. There is no common man, there is no common person that actually benefits from this. I actually love the fact that we need supposed to introduce a tax to this club so that we net in these people that are actually in clubs, clubbing and using a lot of money and want to be exempted. The other one, Mr. Speaker, is the introduction of the 5% withholding tax on advertisement. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of diseases that are coming to this country because advertising has become so cheap that people are misleading Kenyans. We've actually seen people being conned. We've seen people buying products that are not necessary because there is no tax on advertising. Mr. Speaker, introducing a 5% withholding tax on this will actually safeguard Kenyans from the conmen that are actually advertising if they are allowed to advertise for free. Finally, if I go to the housing, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this country, we host the 3 main out of 10 slums in Africa. And until we actually agree to say we want to move out of the slums, we will continue premising and saying that we are not ready. We should be ready as now, Mr. Speaker. We want to move from being a country that is living in slums to a country that is supposed now to be a developed country. Mr. Speaker, if I look at the superhighway, the Thika superhighway, if I look at the SGR, I look at the Nairobi Expressway, everybody in this country, the people of Kachaliba contributed to it, Mr. Speaker, and yet they don't use it on everyday basis. So even this housing, we are all supposed to contribute to it, because at the end of it all, when Kenyans get houses, whether you get it or not, it is for the common good of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me a chance to speak to this bill. And I first of all start by congratulating the Committee on Finance for the tedious and good work that they did, and even all the way to calling out the public participation. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday we concluded on the Committee on Supply on the budget. And we were able to adopt and to pass this, Mr. Speaker. And therefore today, we are discussing the finance bill, which is supposed to look for money to finance to run this budget, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I failed to understand how yesterday we can be able to pass the bill on the Committee of Supply, and today we start going against on how to finance it. Mr. Speaker, sir, our budget of 3.67 trillion must be financed by the people of this Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, let us not go out and not be realistic and even play politics, populist politics, to tell our people that we are against the finance bill just because there is the taxation. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no other way that we can be able to finance our budget other than through the taxation. Mr. Speaker, all of us, we understand that the cost of living is not good to all of us. We also understand that there is the debt that was left by the last regime, Mr. Speaker. We also understand there is unemployment and so many other. And therefore, as a government, we must look into how we are going to focus on areas to stimulate the economic growth and reduce the cost of living, among other development measures that are awaited by our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm surprised to see the Azimio coalition standing up and going against this finance bill. Yet all the time we see the government officers visiting their areas. Every stand up with a mic to request for a load. Another one requesting for the installation of electricity in their rural areas, the constituencies. They also speak a lot about the health. They speak a lot and to so many other areas. My question today, how do we finance for all the requests that you put? And that time you are taking the mic to ask that. It is so that your people can hear that you are really asking from the government so that they may get the development. That time you are happy when you hear the crabs that you have made your day. You have made your political marriage. But when we come here to look for money to finance this development, you are here standing up and talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My dear, let us be optimistic that for this government to deliver, we must go for the taxation. We are against for more loans because, Mr. Speaker, sir, for whatever we have not been able to pay. You have heard from the budget committee, they are saying 60% of our finances that we have is going to finance the roads. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is only 40% that is being left for the development and also for the liquor. So, Mr. Speaker, we must struggle to make sure whatever our people are waiting for, we look for it, and it can only come from the taxation. And we are taxing those who are employed. We are taxing those who are in business. We are taxing those who have. Let us not incite our people who do not have when we are trying to create some employment and some areas that they can be able to employ themselves so that they can also be able to put food on their table. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no one here who came to this plenary without taking breakfast. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to take lunch. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to enjoy good supper or dinners. Mr. Speaker, sir, the people that we are looking for do not have anything to put on their table. They are not even able to give clothing and other needed measures that are required to their children. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must realize this. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to speak a little onto the housing fund. We have really put a lot of politics when it...
Time is up. Memusi Kanjori.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I oppose the finance bill, and I really pity with my colleagues from Kenya Kwanza, because they are really trying to justify something that they also know will not fly in their villages. Mr. Speaker, this is a draconian and backward way of collecting revenue from our people. Honorable Speaker, as representatives of the people, I want to hear one member of parliament whose people come to him to ask for a house. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, where the executive has been informed that the priority of Kenyans is houses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, please protect me. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members, I will protect you, also avoid unhelpful provocations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposal, Mr. Speaker, to collect 2,500 shillings and targeting 3 million Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, that is collecting 7.5 billion shillings a month. Honorable Speaker, 7.5 billion shillings a month. If this money was proposed to be put in education, which is an area that most of our people are in need of, if this 7.5 billion shillings was put in education, I would gladly contribute 2,500 shillings. And Mr. Speaker, the impact that money would have, 7.5 billion, if that money was given to 290 constituencies, which these members of parliament represent, each constituency will get over 25 million shillings a month. That is something that if was proposed, we would gladly support. Because, Mr. Speaker, our people need certain basic things, food being one of them. Honorable Speaker, the money that Kenyans contribute to NHIF, for example, the money that Kenyans contribute to NSSF, NHIF right now is broke. It cannot pay its expenses. NSSF, people are retiring and cannot be given their pension. You want to come and tell people who are already seeing misappropriation of money to continue contributing. Mr. Speaker, this is wrong. I see a lot of insensitivity in this government. I see a lot of cluelessness. And Mr. Speaker, let me say this. The unfortunate thing, when the UDA administration was campaigning, they appealed to the people who are desperate in this country. They appealed to the so-called hustlers. But, Mr. Speaker, the first opportunity that this government had to show that they really meant what they said, this is the first budget that they are bringing. This first opportunity that they have, they've squandered it. They've squandered it, Mr. Speaker, because the first thing that I would have wanted to see is how the loopholes of corruption will be sealed, how wastage will be sealed by this government. Mr. Speaker, if we cannot continue affording a budget of over 3 trillion shillings, what is wrong with us saying that this country can only finance 2.1 trillion shillings and not tax Kenyans to death? Mr. Speaker, I oppose. Thank you.
Mishimbogo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to strongly oppose this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, a formula of taxation which is going to burden the Kenyans and increase the cost of living, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, increasing the fuel levy to 16%, it means the cost of production is going to be high, the cost of transportation is going to be high. It will also affect agriculture, because agriculture depends on machinery, and the machinery also depends on diesel and petrol power.
Order.
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Mishimbogo, you'll have 4.5 minutes. You will be the first in the afternoon. Members, you may rise. It's now 1 o'clock. We'll take a lunch break and resume at 2:30.